Dr. Richards, you attended a conference on early migration and premature mortality in June of 2008.
Yes, that's correct. I did attend most of that. I wasn't there for the full meeting again, but I was there for most of that meeting.
So now this is a document that's a tab 8 of my list of documents, but it's an early draft of the document that became Exhibit 557 that was entered when Dr. Hinch testified. Can I just go to page 64 of this document, though? Yes, and if you could just blow up the abstract in the bottom third of the page. So at that conference, Dr. Miller presented her hypothesis that the disease agent is intercellular, possibly a virus. Do you remember that?
There was certainly a presentation that she made at that meeting, and I can't recall specifically exactly what she said, but I have to assume that the abstract is an accurate representation.
Well, you in fact attended there as the co-chair of the Committee on Scientific Cooperation.
Correct.
And ultimately prepared a summary of these proceedings.
Yes, that's correct. Well, a very short summary that was sort of based on this.
But Dr. Hinch sent you a copy of the very document we're looking at.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, and so you reviewed it.
Well, I didn't review I can't say that I honestly read every single line in this document, but I did skim the document, yes.
If we could go over to page 66, in the middle of the page. Again, under the 4 lines under the healthy, unhealthy profiles, you see that a reference to viral or parasitic origin. So you'd agree with me, would you, that the department, DFO Science, was aware of this viral hypothesis at least as early as June of 2008?
We were certainly aware of the fact that this was a hypothesis, and I think we were very actively hoping and trying to work with Christy to get more information so that we could actually, get more solid information behind this. I think we all we realized that this is incredibly, from a scientific standpoint, this work was incredibly exciting and interesting, but it was also very novel and right on the edge of the very breaking kind of science. And so we also wanted to get more information and to try to encourage her to do some more work so that we could actually get some more substance behind this.
If I could ask Mr. Lund if you'd go to tab 13. Mr. Commissioner, I'm not going to propose that this document go in as an exhibit simply because we have Exhibit 557 and it's identical in these particular lines, unless someone wants it in as an exhibit. At tab 13, then, this is you've reviewed this document, Dr. Richards?
I believe, this was not a document that was submitted by me. I think I saw it.
This is a funding request.
Yeah.
That would run through your
well,
office.
this was, she was certainly working with Mark Saunders at the time, and I don't specifically recall, but I probably did see this document.
All right, and this is a November 13th, 2008 briefing note. If I could ask that we blow up the second paragraph. You'll see the reference there in the middle of the paragraph to the unhealthy profile fish characterized by early river entry and high in-river mortalities and a 16 times greater probability of dying en route. That's a very significant finding from a departmental perspective.
Well, this work was done in the context of the other work that was done on the early entry of late-run sockeye, and certainly we were party to, and basically since about 2002, we were supporting research into trying to understand why this was actually happening. Some of the work that's being done here is perhaps most leading us to perhaps more evidence about what was going on there. So obviously, yes, we're very interested in this work. but we're also realizing, they say, that this is very basically cutting-edge science, and when as soon as you start looking at this, you start raising more questions than you have answers.
Yes. Well, you see the last line of that paragraph, that functional analysis revealed that unhealthy fish were responding to an intercellular pathogen with profiles most consistent with a retroviral infection. So the concept of retrovirus was certainly out there in the department, at least as early as 2008.
I mean, there had been some speculation. I mean, this is early thinking and speculation on this. This is not fully developed, peer-reviewed science. And what we're trying to do, or we're interested in doing, is trying to confirm whether, in fact, this was correct or not.
But it would not be correct to say that the hypothesis that this could be a retrovirus first occurred in mid or late 2009. It occurred in 2008.
I can't recall it specifically when this was first being done, but certainly I know that Dr. Miller was very active in sort of thinking about this, and we were certainly trying to get more information, but I'd say this time it was very early in her analysis.
You notice in the next paragraph, if we could scroll down a bit, that the reference is to salmon leukemia virus, their SLV on the fourth line, and marine salmon anemia, also called plasmacytoid leukemia. So by November 2008, that hypothesis was present in the department.
Yes, it was there as a hypothesis.
You'll see the last line of that paragraph, if we can scroll down a bit. Yes. The table below lists the accumulating evidence that suggests the disease afflicting our sockeye salmon is retroviral in nature and could be plasmacytoid leukemia. And there's a table over the page that lists that evidence. So there's accumulating evidence at that point, is there?
Well, there's some evidence. I mean, I think to be fair to what was going on here, I think the expertise by Dr. Miller was really in the area of the genomics, and we did have others in the department that were more knowledgeable about viruses and about fish health in particular. But certainly that she was very focused on this and has been working to try to get more evidence and further information on this particular topic.
If I could just go back, to the previous page at the very bottom. The last line, vertical transmission of this virus would also introduce the possibility of effects at other developmental stages such as smolts. Do I take it that you don't understand what that means? Or?
Well, I think we went through that already, so
okay. Over the page then, just underneath the table. Dr. Miller here refers to it in this document as the potential devastating impacts of this disease on sockeye salmon. You see those words? Just below the table.
Okay, yes.
Yes, now, I think I asked you on November 4th, when you were last here, when science is dealing with something that is a potentially devastating impact, do you act any differently? Do you fund more research? Do you move quicker?
We try to do, certainly, I would hope that we would do that. But say this was very cutting edge work, and I think we were extremely interested, and I certainly were aware of these potential consequences, but we also wanted to try to get more information, and we're wanting to work with Dr. Miller so that we could get more substantive information to understand this, and also to understand the scope, because as I said, once you start to look at this, you certainly come up with more questions.
You'll see at the bottom line of that paragraph that the request is for $60,000 in funding for 2009 and 2010. Do you know if Dr. Miller got that funding?
I can't recall precisely how much funding we did find, but I know that we did provide her with some additional funding. I can't recall precisely what the amount was.
Well, in terms of potentially devastating impacts, certainly you gave her the whole funding she was requesting, didn't you?
I think that what we want to do is, Like the normal process is that scientists often try to inflate their budgets a little bit, so we normally would do a bit of challenge to say what really of this piece is the most important right now to get that. So we would always sort of go and look at those numbers and try to focus on the things that were the highest priority.
Well, would you be able to determine, by going back to your office, whether that funding was provided or how much? And could you provide that to Commission Council?
I would have to discuss it with some others because I'm not sure exactly what the root of that funding was. It was probably done through the office of Mark Saunders, who was the division manager. So it was probably his group that provided the additional funding rather than directly from my office.
So,
I'm sure we can probably find it. Yes, I'm sure.
And so you'll agree to provide that information?
We will try to provide it. We'll do everything we can to provide that information for you.
Mr. Lunn, if I could go to tab 36, which I think is a... Oh, hold it. Before I do that, I should probably mark this document as an exhibit. The November 13, 2008 briefing note.
Exhibit 635.
So if I could go to what is tab 36, if that's a letter of March 3rd, 2011. Yes, thank you. Dr. Richards, this is a letter to Dr. Morton from the minister. Did you have a hand in drafting this letter?
I did not draft the letter, and probably would have, more than likely would have gone through me to approve it, but I did not draft it.
All right, well, can I just draw your attention to the second last paragraph on that page? The statement from the minister is in the last sentence that sockeye salmon that were studied were sampled in 2006, but the tissue was not analyzed until 2008 and 2009, and the hypothesis that the results indicated possible exposure to a virus was not made until mid-2009. You see that statement?
Yes, I do.
Now, that's incorrect, isn't it? It was actually mid-2008.
I take your point about that earlier note and that possibility, but I think I'm not quite sure exactly. There were multiple things going on here and multiple studies, and so I think it's sort of in the context of which pieces. It's possible that it was. Yeah, I take your point from that earlier documentation, but I'm just not quite sure what the background here in relation to this particular piece and linking that particular response to the other work that we were just discussing.
Well, this is potentially a very important matter, Dr. Richards. If a potentially devastating impact from a virus was identified in 2008 by a senior scientist at DFO, I'm going to ask you what action was taken between 2008 and 2009 to deal with that.
Yes, and what we wanted to do and what we're doing, as I mentioned, was that we were trying to get more information and try to get more background to confirm this. So what as I said, I know that we provided more funding to Dr. Miller. I can't at this point say exactly how much, but we were encouraging that more work could be done because we also wanted to, this was her personal point of view at that time, and we wanted to confirm that and try to get as much additional information as we could.
Well, the statement from the minister in 2011 that the hypothesis wasn't made until mid-2009, as we've seen, is potentially incorrect. And what I'd like to know is, was the minister misinformed by your department on that?
If that's the case, then there would have been something that we had reviewed internally, and in fact, yes.
If you could do it again, you'd correct that, would you?
Well, you've pointed to some additional pieces, but again, I'm not sure of the context. I'd have to verify all that.
All right. If we could go to a document...
I think in this context, what we're talking about is some other very specific samples that were not analyzed in that time. So there were a lot of samples and a lot of work that was going on, so I'm just trying to match the specific samples with the response. So that's why I can't give you a completely clear answer on this.
Could I ask that that exhibit be marked?
Exhibit 636.
The letter of March 3rd, 2011 from the minister. If I could ask you, Mr. Lund, to go to document at tab 16. Dr. Richards, this is a workshop on February 6th, 2009. The list of attendees seems to include you
That's correct.
and Dr. Miller, 4 lines below you.
Yes.
And Dr. Miller gave another presentation at that workshop.
Yes. Well, to be clear, this workshop, there were no formal presentations at this workshop. This was a small group, and what happened at this particular meeting was there was an opportunity of basically a round table where everyone got to speak for a few minutes, but it wasn't a formal presentation.
Well, if we go to page 17 of that document, you can review page 17, 18, and 19. Can we just, there's two or 2.5 pages there of a report from Dr. Miller. So she reported again on her work on the virus at that conference, did she not?
She reported on the work that she was doing, yes.
And so you were aware of that work at that time?
I mean, I was aware of the work that she was doing, yes.
All right. If I could now go to the document that was marked this morning at Exhibit 614, which is at tab 3 of the Commission documents.
Sorry, Mr. McDade, did you intend to mark the documents?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Wallace. Yes, could I mark that last exhibit, the reports?
Exhibit 637.
Thank you. And so Exhibit 614, tab 3. If we go to page 5 of that document, please. This document is a summary of the September 30th, 2009 Science Review.
I think it was more than a summary of that. I think that there was additional material that was put in, and it would have perhaps been updated. So it may have been a bit of an expansion on what was done at that time. At the time this document was prepared, it would have been the most up-to-date information that was provided by the researchers.
Well, if we go to the page 1 here, it seems to be an email from Mr. Saunders dated November 12, 2009. So that would be the date of this particular document?
I can't say precisely what the date of the actual document was. I know that this was intended as a living document, and it was worked on at various times.
Well, if I could go to page 4 again. If we go to the very bottom of that page. Yes, thank you. A little lower. There's a computer record at the bottom of the document. I just want to blow up a bit. It seems to indicate a date of November 9. Can we agree that this document was accurate as of November 9?
That would have been 2009
Oh,
in November, not in the 9th of November.
Okay, so an uncertain date in November. But in any event, so this represented the departmental thinking as of November 2009?
Well, this represented a summary of what the scientists had compiled as their best evidence. No, this was not a peer-reviewed document. This was a contributed document based on their best evidence at that time, and it was really intended for internal use.
So this was a peer-reviewed document representing...
No, I'm saying it was not a peer-reviewed document.
Okay.
Just to be clear, it was something that it was put together by the individual contributors to let others internal to the science know what they were thinking at the time, to help them in the context of their overall thinking about what might have happened in 2009 to the sockeye.
Again, you see the last line of the large paragraph under disease, viral arrays pointed to the presence of a virus in the retrovirus family. So that was still the department's thinking in November of 2009?
That was the work that was put forward by Dr. Miller at that time.
Oh,
Say this piece would have been contributed by Dr. Miller to that overall document.
if I could go over the page to the second paragraph on the next page, starting the very significant reduction. It suggests that the en route mortality may be indicative of lesion-associated mortality, and that if so, the levels of mortality required to bring prevalence levels down by over 30% would be sufficient in magnitude to account for large-scale losses in the ocean. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, the next sentence says that it's possible that the lesions could regress. But if, in fact, the lesions were the cause of the mortality, what that statement says is large-scale mortality. This could be the cause of the 2009 decline, right?
That's what that statement says. Or I should at least could have said could have been a contributor to.
Well, it didn't say that, does it? On its own, it's responsible for large-scale
Yes,
mortality.
but we need to look at all of this in context.
Yes. So that document was available to you when you were preparing the briefing notes to the minister?
And I think we need to, I just need to be a little clear of the context here and the timing, because we actually started preparing the briefing note after the meeting, or in October was when we had started working on the briefing note, I believe. And this one is from November. So there could have been a little bit more thinking that has gone into this subsequent to the material that we had at the time that we did the first draft on that briefing note.
Well, there's nothing new in that statement I just read to you, I suggest, than what was in the September 30th presentation. The September 30th presentation speculates at the same point, that large-scale mortality.
Yeah, I think through this period we were continuing to get some more information, but I don't dispute that there was, yes, that there was some thinking that could have been an issue that could have been could have been sufficient in magnitude to account for the decline. And that information is referenced in the briefing note.
Well, now, as you say, you were preparing this briefing note from very early in October, at least from October 5th or 6th, right?
Yes.
And if I could go over to Exhibit 615, we'll look at that. So that's an email dated October 6th with an attached draft of the factors affecting sockeye return on the next page. Now, this is a document that you had the pen on, right? You were the drafting officer
This would have been written by Mark Saunders.
of your office?
Yes, yes. He is the division manager that is responsible for the salmon division. He's been interviewed here several times.
And so you and Mr. Saunders together organized the September 30th conference?
Yes, most of the work was done by Mr. Saunders.
And you and Mr. Saunders were responsible for this document?
As I said, Mr. Saunders did the first draft of this document, but we did work on it together, yes.
Now, Mr. Commissioner, I just want to say for the record at this point that we asked formally of Commission Council that Mr. Saunders be present at this time, and we've asked that he be called. I just leave that recommendation with my
Mr.
friends.
Saunders has been called in here several times, and he's not in Canada at the moment.
On this subject is what our request was in relation. Can I go to page 2, which would be, I suppose, the third page of the exhibit, page 2 of the attachment. Now, so this was an early draft. This was an early draft of the document, and in it you go through a number of possible scenarios for various causes. I just want to take you through your conclusions at this time, or yours or Mr. Saunders, whichever it was. The first, pollution in lake watersheds that was said to be unlikely as the cause of the 2009 decline, right?
Yes.
The second, fishery effects, it says possible impacts, but if you look at the last line, the conclusion was it would only explain a small proportion of the 2009 mortality. That was your conclusion at the time.
Yes.
So that was not the likely cause of the 2009 decline, in your view at that time.
Yes.
The third bullet is the viral disease effects. And the conclusion there is in the middle of that the virus could be a major contributor to the mortality occurring through the life history. And that it could provide an explanation for the short and long-term declines for sockeye. Is that right?
Yes.
And the only reason for not including that is that you have to complete histology to confirm the virus.
Well, I think the histology was not for the virus, as I recall. The histology was more looking at the tumor issue.
So at least this bullet was a possible cause of the 2009 decline.
Yes.
The next bullet is predation offshore by Humboldt squid. It said that that's a possible impact. Later, but down the paragraph, it suggests that it's not a key factor. That's the second last line of that paragraph, right?
Yes.
The next one is predation in the Strait of Georgia. And your conclusion then was that that was unlikely to be the impact for 2009, right?
Yes.
And the next one was sea lice. And what you say there is it's possible, and let me paraphrase the first sentence. While it's possible that sea lice from farms contributed to the mortality, the degree of impact is difficult to assess. So you weren't attributing the 2009 cause to sea lice at that point.
That's correct.
The next heading on the following page is the mortality attributed to algal blooms. And if you look to the fifth line there, the no reports of fish kills suggests it is unlikely. So your conclusion again was, although it was a possible impact, it was unlikely.
Well, that's what is written here, but that's not consistent with I think what we have a little bit later.
Right, but at this time, your conclusion
Well,
was...
say this was, I think, the first draft that Mr. Saunders had done for our discussion, so it's possible that not everything in here is actually quite correct. So I suspect that he just miscopied something or didn't interpret something correctly when he drafted this.
All right, but we'd have to have Mr. Saunders to know that, wouldn't we?
Yes, but this was just his first draft, but then we did come up with another draft very shortly after that, I think so.
But you were relying on Mr. Saunders at this point to attribute that cause as being unlikely.
This is the work that he had just put in, and he was considering that's what he has written in this note.
All right, the next phrase related to the krill fishery. And there again, the reference is that the 2009 impact was unlikely. That's both in the first line and then the fourth line.
Yes.
And the mortality due to low prey abundance, there doesn't seem to be a rating in that paragraph, but that's the one that you said subsequently lessened in your view as being a significant cause.
I think that we did go through some different thinking on that. I think that, no, there was, when we did actually write that note, we did think that that was actually probably a fairly significant factor. I think there is still some scientific question about how significant that is, and we're still doing research to come up with that. I think at this point, we would rate the Strait of Georgia issues as probably higher than than the factors that happen in Queen Charlotte Sound.
Well, I suggest to you of all of those factors then, at that point, the most likely factor in your conclusions was the disease factor.
Based on what is in that note at that time, but this was just an early draft.
Now, I note under recommendations, the only specific one, of course, that's dealt with is exactly that, the one that's probably most likely, the disease work, the second bullet. Right?
Yes.
And what is said there by you and Mr. Saunders is the disease work will be of extreme interest and may be quite controversial. Now, can you explain to the Commissioner what you meant by extreme interest and why?
Well, okay, first of all, it's not what I meant. As I said, this was the first draft of the note that was done by Mr. Saunders. But I think what's intended here is we do think that, we think that the work that Christy Miller has done is very important and first of all, it's very interesting scientifically, but also very important from trying to contribute an understanding to what's going on here. I mean, her research was one of the key pieces of research, which was actually really finding some results that seemed that they could be playing into what was going on in terms of the 2009 return. And so, yes, we were obviously very, very interested in that. We're also aware that her hypothesis around the viruses, as you've said, could be controversial, and we needed to get some more information to try to verify what was actually going on.
And by controversial, did you understand that to mean controversial in terms of the public reaction?
Yes.
And the next line says a communication strategy has to be developed, or should be developed. What did that mean, a communication strategy?
Well, I say this was initial draft that Mr. Saunders had done about that work, and just thinking about normally, but this is really if I can go back to process. I mean, this is a standard piece when we have of the way that the things work. When we have some new findings or new information, we would normally prepare some kind of briefing note. We would normally prepare some, if we think that there's going to be queries in the media about this information, we would normally help staff in preparing communication lines or media lines around this kind of information. So that's probably what was implied by Mr. Saunders at this time. And as I said, this is just part of standard operating practice.
Well, were you concerned about public overreaction?
Well, we were concerned about trying to get as much of the truth out as possible, and we were concerned about trying to be as factual as we could and trying to figure out what really was going on, because yes, I think we were concerned about overreaction, but that's because we just also had more questions ourselves, and we know if we had questions, there were going to be other questions that were going to be posed, and we wanted to be in a position to try to get answers to some of those questions.
Was a communication plan prepared?
I don't recall that one was prepared.
Let me suggest to you that the communications plan was not to release this to the public at all.
That is false.
When did the department first release to the public that there was a suspected virus in salmon?
Well, I think Christy Miller has been going to various meetings and talking to that, and there was some discussion in various forums about this. There has certainly been some, more recent publications, but when there have been presentations given, that has been on the table. As you already pointed out, that was given at the workshop that was done, convened by Scott Hinch in 2008.
No, my question to you relates to releasing this data to the public or to the media, not to scientific forums.
Well, I mean, our job is not to release things directly to the media. That's not the role of science within the department. What I do is to try to inform the decision makers.
You don't write letters to the media? The department doesn't write letters to the media relating to the sea lice threat, for instance?
Yes, the department writes letters, but normally letters would be done in response to something that was sent to us.
Let me suggest to you the first time this question of the virus has ever been in the public record in the media was November 3rd, 2010, when the Globe and Mail released this memorandum.
Well, I object to the question. How is the witness supposed to know when the media did something? I doubt Mr. McDade knows when the media did everything that they do.
Well, I'll rephrase the question. Do you know whether the media has ever been told of this disease?
I think, Mr. Commissioner, I don't, I'm not really interested, or that my job has not got to do with what the media knows or doesn't know. Certainly, we have been opportunities where this was discussed. This was discussed at the, for example, it was discussed at the June Pacific Salmon Commission meeting. There's some discussion about that within the within that meeting. So it was, and as we already said, there was some discussion about it at the workshop on late run sockeye that you've already pointed to. So certainly these things were sort of known within the scientific community. It's not that we normally, or our process would not be to go directly to the media on this. Our process would be to prepare scientific papers that that follow through a normal peer review process, where then this stuff would be released through the normal peer review channels.
Could I go to Exhibit 628, please?
Mr. Commissioner, I just note that by the allocation, Mr. McDade has 8 minutes.
Well, I count 9, but I'll I'll see what we can do. Exhibit 628, please. All right. This is the document, Dr. Richards, where
Okay.
Dr. Miller is quoted as saying that you don't want to indicate to the PSC that disease research is of strategic importance. Where did you get that idea?
I don't know where she got that impression, and that impression that she has is completely false.
And at the bottom of the page, the earlier email, Laura does not want me to attend any of the sockeye salmon workshops that are not run by DFO for fear that we will not be able to control the way the disease issue could be construed in the press.
Again, that is also a misrepresentation of what was going on.
Did you talk to her about this?
I probably did talk to her, and she say this is, I'm sure I did talk to her about this, and unfortunately this is not, clearly I did not communicate what was going on. But I think the issue here is really, the issue, as I explained earlier, was really one of process. We realized that this was a very important issue, and we wanted a chance, following our normal practice, to make sure that we briefed up and informed our senior authorities and up the line before things were announced publicly, which is the normal practice within the department. We had taken a little longer to get this information up than we would have liked, because the work that Dr. Miller was doing was changing and evolving so quickly. We wanted to keep having the most up-to-date contextual information, and that story just kept changing. So what we really, the issue here is that we were trying to wait to get some more results from her before we put the note up, and then suddenly we had a meeting that was called, and we hadn't had a chance to do the full briefing up the line. So it's not that we were trying to hide something, it was more that we were trying to make sure that we had information go up the line before people were surprised by reports in the media.
So once you'd given the disease briefing note, then any reluctance to let her go to the media would have been gone?
Yes. On my part, but as I say, within the department, there's a process on this, and this process was then complicated by calling the formation of this commission. And as I mentioned earlier today, when the commission was first established, we weren't quite sure within DFO of what our ground rules were and what we could do and how we were supposed to behave in that context.
Dr. Richards, when Dr. Miller released her science paper in January of this year,
Yes,
she was told she should not speak to the media. Are you aware of that?
yes. And again, I think, but yeah.
And throughout all of 2010, she was told she shouldn't speak to the media. Isn't that right?
I cannot, I'm not aware of other instances.
I'd like to take you to Exhibit 622A. the speaking notes for a member of Parliament. You were aware those speaking notes were being produced for an emergency session of Parliament?
Yes, I gave that evidence already today.
Right, and the title, as I see, is for a debate on the low returns of sockeye salmon to the Fraser River. You understood that was the subject of the speech?
That's, I'm just going with the title. I wasn't party to how that work was being divided up.
Well, Doctor, when I read that speech, it seems to be a whole bunch about how sea lice is not the problem, but there's not one word in that speech about virus. Is that right?
As I say, I did not write these. They were based on information that we had, and some of that information may have. I know that what they were doing, though, was trying to divide up some of this material between various different notes. I think the issue of diseases was somewhere in these. I don't recall specifically which one.
If we go to page 7 of that document, you see the second paragraph. A number of factors could be the cause, including the impact of climate change. Now, you knew, Dr. Richards, at the time that speech was being written for Parliament, that virus was the leading cause, a likelihood. And why is it that it doesn't
I
appear?
object.
Sorry?
Dr. Richards isn't here to answer how someone else wrote a briefing note, or a speech, rather.
I think it's a relevant question. I have nothing more to say.
Well,
on that.
in addition, she hasn't testified, and I don't think Mr. McDade has put forward any evidence that everyone knew that a virus was the leading cause of something or other.
Lucky just a question of rephrasing your question.
Why, Dr. Richards, didn't you ensure in your advice on this document that Parliament was informed about the virus?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, these things were done through different notes, and we were still trying to determine whether, in fact, there was a virus. So work has been ongoing to determine whether or not there was actually a virus, and that work is still ongoing to say whether this is actually a virus or not. To the best of my knowledge, we have not confirmed whether there's still a virus that's related to the genomic signature that we've seen. So I think, and what we have said is that there were other things that were in play, as well as that there were other factors that we thought were in the highly likely category at that time. It's possible that all of these factors were happening simultaneously. So I think we're thinking that it's just not one, but there's probably a host of factors here that are interacting. So my recollection is that there were other notes that were more explicit on this particular topic, or other of these speeches that were prepared that had some other information in it.
Can I go to tab 22 of my document? Dr. Richards, here's a request from Dr. Miller for funding for the fiscal year January to March 2010 to identify the virus in the retrovirus family. You see that in the middle of the page. $87,000 in funding is requested. Was that provided?
I don't know where this was intended. I don't know. Scientists write proposals all the time to different funding sources, and I'm not sure what funding source was intended with this particular note. Perhaps you should ask Dr. Miller about that.
Can I go to tab 25?
Mr. McDade, did you wish to have that marked?
Yes, please.
You're now into injury time.
All right, I'll be 2 minutes. This will be my last document I refer to. So that's
638.
638. That's a funding request to, again, establish the prevalence and intensity of the viral signature. And if you go over the page to item 3, there's a request for establishing whether or not aquaculture fish could be affected by the purported viral disease and could thus be carriers. And you'll see the cost is set out in bold in the middle paragraph. Cost to establish using arrays whether antiviral signature is present in Atlantic salmon, $18,750. Was that funded?
I don't know whether that specifically was funded. I believe it was, but I can't confirm that exactly. Again, I'm not exactly sure. We have a lot of different particular funding sources that are going on here, and I'm not sure exactly which one this was. I presume it was, but I can't confirm that.
The minister's letter of March 3rd says DFO has not conducted research associated with this gene expression signature and salmon farms and will not speculate on such a link. Has it been done or not?
I am not aware of the status of that work.
The DFO has contributed something like $23 million to aquaculture research. Why? And to making, including making genetically modified fish that would be protected from virus. Why is the department not prepared to fund this kind of work?
That's not something for this witness.
Well, isn't she the person who testified as to how funding took place?
I mean, I think we would be interested in the work. I'm just not sure about this particular, whether this was in fact done or not. I agree that we would be interested in doing that work, but I just can't verify whether in fact it was done.
At this point, you have no information as to whether fish farms are the cause of this disease or not, do you? None at all.
I think we have no particular reason to suspect at this point that there is any link, as was said. Nor do we have, as I mentioned, we're still trying to confirm what we've actually got in terms of what's causing the signature.
Thank you. Thank you for the extra time, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. McDade. The province of British Columbia, Mr. Prowse.
Yes, DC Prowse, Mr. Commissioner, and here on behalf of the province, I suspect that I may free up some time for those who are following me. Dr. Richards, you got a PhD in 1982, I think is what your CV tells us. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And what was it that led you to have an interest in this field?
In the whole field of marine science, well, it was probably Jacques Cousteau when I was a child.
All right. And you then pursued that interest with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Yes, that's correct.
And your CV tells us you got 3 promotions, and then in 1997, 1998, you made the fateful step into management. So, first of all, I think your CV indicates you'd done something like 40 research papers.
Yeah, in the...
Participated in them?
I should say those were papers that were in the peer-reviewed literature.
I see. So that doesn't include others that were internal or...
That's correct.
So what was it that led you to abandon, abandon's not the right word because you're still doing some papers, but why did you make the leap into management?
Well, I mean, I think it happens usually, things happen in a career because of where you are and the place at the time, and it's sort of a logical next step, but I think we're also, it's something that I care about, and I think it was I appreciated the opportunity to work with such an incredible group of researchers that we have in the department, and I considered it a real privilege.
What have been the challenges and rewards since you've been a manager in DFO science?
Well, I think clearly, as I mentioned, the challenges, the rewards are working with such an incredible group of people, having such interesting scientific problems, and being able to work with people who are really world class in the field.
A miscellaneous question, if I might. Earlier in the week, we marked as an exhibit part of some work that was done by Dr. Selby. Can you tell me anything about his background? Or?
He's a relatively new researcher in the department, and he's been here for just a couple of years. I believe his background is to be more in the freshwater research. He's working out of our lab at Cultus Lake.
And Dr. Miller, what can you tell us about her background?
Yes, Dr. Miller has been now with the department for quite some time. She came here initially as a postdoctoral fellow, was working within the Stock ID genetics group, was really working mostly on genetic aspects, and was quite instrumental in developing some of the technology and moving forward some of the technology around genomics.
And have you worked directly with her during her career?
No, I have not worked directly scientifically with her.
All right. You've indicated that you are a supporter of her research. Is that correct?
I mean, absolutely, yes. I mean, I'm a supporter of most of the research that we do.
And earlier, I guess last week, when Dr. Hinch was testifying, we marked as an exhibit her January 2011 article in Science.
Yes.
And what role, if any, did the department play in the leading up to the publication of that article?
Role, and I mean, in the sense of, I think we were trying to be very supportive of her getting this work done. I know Science is a high-profile journal. We like it when our scientists are able to have that kind of profile and that kind of publication.
And what's the benefit to the department and to the public of getting such an article published in that publication, or a publication like that?
Well, I'm not sure to what extent there's I can speak about benefit to the public, but I think that it is certainly that journal is seen as an indication of status, and it certainly is good for the individual researchers in terms of their own research career.
You, and speaking to my friend Mr. McDade earlier, you talked about certain writings that were not peer-reviewed, and what's the importance of that in the science process?
I mean, I think the importance of peer review is really a challenge function, a bit of a sober second look, making sure that things are situated correctly and not misconstrued or just not inaccurate or taken out of context.
And Mr. Taylor, in reviewing I think it was the in-house September 2009, the one, all the attachments, pointed out that many of these statements in that, in the various papers there, generally have changed, and some have been superseded. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And there have been changes in the work
Yes.
of Dr. Miller included in that.
That's correct. I mean, I think what you're witnessing here through this process is really about an evolution of the thinking around a very significant problem.
And part of the scientific process is brainstorming and considering all kinds of possibilities and narrowing those down. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes.
And that's an ongoing process.
Yes.
Many of us in the legal profession and elsewhere are anxious to achieve instant results. I think you've said to Mr. Taylor again this morning that instant science is not something that can happen.
We all wish it could happen much faster than it actually can.
And with respect to the research that was done by Dr. Miller, there's some sampling that was done in 2006, but analysis and research was being done in 2008 and 2009. Is that right?
Yes, well, what happens is often when we're doing work, we will collect samples that we don't have time or aren't analyzed for one particular thing at a particular time. Those samples will be archived, and then they can be drawn on at a later time to do more analyses or a different set of analyses when different questions come to mind.
And with respect to the question of the Miller paper, we've had the 2010 returns have come out between the time of her research and the briefing notes in 2009 and the publication in 2011. Do you have you been party to any discussions about how the 2010 returns might be taken into account in terms of the work that she has done?
I think I'm not. I think that should be a question that if you have an opportunity to speak to her about, I'd rather she speak to that directly.
And indeed, I think that we'll all have the opportunity to do that. Those are my questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I think that as we're proceeding, a 5-minute break would not run us over 4 o'clock, and I think the witness may like a break.
Is that so, Dr.?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
We'll now recess for 5 minutes.